for many people that are not in the realm that we're in, that means that you are on.com. So the CEO was standing there, we're now on.com. And you're sitting in the last row and just thinking like, no, we're not.
On today's episode, I sit down with Max Woelfle. He's currently the SEO Team Lead at On, previously known as On Running. He's spoken in many conferences like Brighton SEO and most recently, Spotlight by SEMrush. Enjoy today's episode. I would love to know more about how you got started, and did you always know that you wanted to be in SEO or in marketing, and how you ended up in the footwear industry for a company like On? Did you know that you wanted to be in footwear? Because in your LinkedIn bio it does say like footwear aficionado, which is very cool. So that maybe you figured out at a young age. And how did you talk us through your background and your journey so far?
I would say it's a lot of positive coincidence and being very lucky and being in the right places at the right time to some extent. So it's three pillars that kind of guided me to where I am right now. So like the first thing is I studied media communication science, if you want to say so. So I have a bit of a background in just understanding how mass media works and how statistics work. And all of that happened without me even knowing what SEO would stand for. Like I had zero idea. I think like back then, I mean, we're talking 2011, 2012. You could already do quite a lot with the right tools and really bootstrap everything. And it was super interesting. And I would say I even contributed a little bit to the fight against COVID because, as a silly anecdote, we also did the website for BioNTech, one of the companies in Germany that came up with one of the COVID vaccines. And I remember uploading the logo to the WordPress page and getting like an email from Ugur Shahin, who's the CEO, and he's probably billionaire and doesn't know who I am, but that's fine. But I did upload the BioNTech logo to their website back then. And through that work, I learned a lot of the basics of how to build a website, which was not my academic background. So I did not study IT or anything like that, but it helped me to like learn the basics. And I have a basic understanding of Python, HTML, JavaScript. So, and I was introduced to this small little plugin called Yoast. And that was like, just type in the SEO title
Not
without
so small
understanding the
anymore.
SEOs. Yeah. And that was, and that was a bit the tools that I learned through that agency work that I had no idea really how impactful that would be ultimately for my professional career. Because then 1 or 2 years later, a guy I knew had a sneaker store in Cologne, and I was just out of university, and I was just thinking I was going to be a digital nomad and live all over the world and just work remote, and thought that was a genius idea. So this guy I knew, like, he had a sneaker boutique store in Cologne, and he also owned sneaker.de as the domain, and he had like a very unsuccessful blog running there, and he just needed someone to do something with it without having a proper idea of what to do with it, and asked me if I would do it. And I said, I'm happy to build everything from scratch, like build the website, write the content, create everything. I just started doing it, right? And I started writing those articles about the shoes that would come out, and I'm passionate about that. And we're talking like 2013, 14 here. That was when the sneaker hype was really at it was, depending on where you are, it was still, in Europe, it was very early stage. It was like pre-Yeezys kind of like, I think at some point Adidas came out with the NMDs, and then they came out with the Yeezys, like the Adidas Yeezys, not the Nike ones. And it was really taking off. I would just write those articles, and I set up Search Console because I had learned to do that without really fully understanding what that meant. And then looking into Search Console over and over, I really learned that people were searching for certain aspects of those articles. Then over time, like I learned, okay, like this is what people want. People want to know when the shoe comes out, where they can purchase it, and not just the story of the shoe. So, and a lot of other people in let's call it the sneaker sphere at the time.
The bloggers. It was sneaker blogs, right? Or probably Hypebeast and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the big ones, they were there, the big ones, but the individual ones that were really only writing about that and only in Germany, they were all going into social because you could reach more people on Facebook by posting on Facebook, and they would just put in the affiliate links into Facebook, and that was just, from a financial point, more worth it. but I didn't really care. I was just out of university. I just wanted to have some fun. And so I was writing those articles, and I saw how it was starting to get traction on Google, and the others were not really producing content for Google at that point.
We're targeting the better intent, the higher intent buyers as well, because it's people who are searching into Google that want to purchase, because the social media campaigns are more awareness, right? Top in the funnels.
Someone forwarded me like an Adidas press release with the photographs, and usually you have a limit. Okay, this sounds a bit cheeky, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was very early, and I was just out of university. I didn't really think about it
You
very
didn't
much.
care about the red tape. You just wanted
Yeah.
to do
So
stuff.
so I just pressed the publish button 3 days earlier, right? And I just ignored the publish date. Plus also like the people at Adidas, they had no idea who I was. They really didn't care that much about it. Next thing I know, all the other blogs, because of course when they see the embargo date but somebody else publishes it, they say source sneaker.de, and they so Hypebeast and High Snob. So they all took the photograph, but they referenced my blog because they probably didn't want to get in trouble with the brands. But so I basically built backlinks by breaching the embargo date. And you could see how that flipped the switch. And all of a sudden there was the traffic.
What I'm curious to know is, were you involved in actually the migration of on running to on?
Yes, that was quite the roller coaster on, because when I started, we did a complete front end and technology migration. Basically, people had been working on for 2 years, and they haven't flipped the switch when I started. So there was an immense pressure to start with a completely new website. And if you go into a new company and you start on the 15th of November, which is also high season for retailers with Black Friday and the Christmas business, and you come in and the first thing that you tell everyone, we can't go live yet, because it was so client side heavy that Google and Bing would not see anything other than an empty page, because the JavaScript was so tricky to render. And the first thing you do is tell like this huge operation that on is like, no, we can't go live. Sorry. And pushing it like a month later, and then we kind of like MacGyvered our way out of it. So that was the first migration. The second migration was, I still remember this day, we have these huge global town halls where there's the CEO. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know what your function is. But we had just recently purchased on.com as a domain. And as you can imagine, that's not a cheap domain to do. And that's like a very foundational thing.
Were you also part of the decision for making it on running to on? Because from an SEO perspective, on running would have been great, and trying to rank for on is a whole other beast. But yeah, sorry to derail you.
No. It's a very, very valid question, because I mean, I was not part of that conversation, but I was informed that, okay, we want to be on, purchase on. And also that was a moment when um, on as a company pivoted from being purely a running brand into a sportswear brand. And they had recently added Roger Federer and the whole tennis line to the brand. And at some point, if you're called on running and you want to do tennis and you want to do training and you want to do all day gear, it's not a good name anymore. And there's a whole podcast in itself where the name comes from, super interesting. But I understood that from a branding perspective, it makes complete sense to change to on.com. And also it's also like a super interesting project. But I remember the moment when we had this global town hall and the CEO, and I knew we had just purchased on.com. And there was a redirect implemented. We did like a bit of due diligence, so there's no toxic backlinks or no garbage on the old domain, because it was a dating website at some point back in the days. But it was more or less okay as a domain. It wasn't too burned. So you're sitting there, and you know that there's on a domain level, there's a redirect from on.com to onrunning.com. So if you're not a technical, let's call it an internet person, you can type in on.com and you can end up buying a shoe from our D2C store. For many people that are not in the realm that we're in, that means that you are on.com. So the CEO was standing there, we're now on.com. And you're sitting in the last row and just thinking like, no, we're not. We are very, very far away from that. There are so many subdomains. There's so much stuff going on. That's like really, and then you realize I was probably leaving like being completely pale. I was leaving that meeting, because you understand, okay, there's now an immense pressure on doing this migration. And there are a couple of blueprints that you could look at. So I think TransferWise to Wise.com, they did like a really successful migration and relatively well documented. I think Fabrizio did that like really well. And, I could use that as an example to show people this is where we want to be, but we have to actually do this. So it became this huge project that I was fortunate enough to lead, and also for the company to trust me in leading that. You really have to fine tune, because when do you want to do that? Because you are going to lose some revenue when you flip the switch. So you end up having like this one tiny fragmented window in February when, okay, this is when we sell fewer products, because it's not marathon season, it's not tennis, it's not this, it's not Black Friday, it's not the sales season. So it's like you end up having this really small window in February where everything has to be ready for the switch to flip, to flip the switch. We also did like a few pre-migrations. We first migrated, like we have a second-hand subdomain where you can buy used products, which was called Onward, and we migrated that first to have a few learnings. How do you migrate something? If you tell people, a lot of people will say, "Yeah, just do the redirect; it's done."
Or
It's a
yeah, the
lot,
whole
lot
thing,
more.
not easy.
But you really have to demonstrate those things first, and you have to have people also experience the errors that you make, and also the time. Like everyone always says, like, yeah, how long does the migration take for the rankings to recover? And you can say, well, it depends, but nobody outside of the SEO world wants to hear that. So you have to say, okay, well, when we did that with the secondhand stuff, it took 6 weeks. So we should calculate in our business plan, we're not going to have the same revenue for at least 6 weeks. And that's how you kind of got there, how we got there. And it was ultimately like, if you look at the SEMrush charts, it was a successful migration. And you also have this element when you believe that you want to become on.com. And I think that for our company, that is a very, very foundational effort. If people really associate these two letters with the brand worldwide, that's a huge success, because there are very, very few brands that manage to be like having a word associated with their brand, right? And if you can achieve that, and the migration to on.com is one little stepping stone to get there, happy to do that. Now, when we talk about the whole AI world, this is a whole new headache, because on is a word not only in English. In French, it's on y va. There's at least 7 other languages in which on has a meaning. So it's tricky, even when we come to prompt tracking, you have to have a very sophisticated regex to really see this is our brand and not a cloth that's on the table. So it's, yeah.
That's a whole other mammoth in itself. But before we move on from that, I would just really like your advice on two SEOs out there that are taking on the project of migration, through a name change. What were maybe one of the top two lessons that you learned in hindsight? Like maybe a mistake that you would not repeat if you were ever given this opportunity again, which it seems like you will be, because you did an amazing job with this migration and allowing on to be a standalone and still, have its traffic. And as you said, the SEM rush data proves how successful this migration really was. But yeah, what's maybe your top two advice to SEOs out there that would plan to do this?
So the top advice, I think, like maybe based on the things that have worked well, is really get the important stakeholders together and form like a core group. Like migration is nothing that you do alone. You need to have the right people in frequent calls, or like in also like in a frequency that you can level up, leading up to maybe you meet like every 2 weeks, then you start meeting every week. Then at some point you meet daily. And having like a core group of the right people on the engineering side, also on the payment side, because there are so many layers to a migration. Like really understand how your website works, because if you have payment systems, they all need to be validated for the new domain. You cannot move somewhere else unless you really have the checkout also validated. All of a sudden people can pay with their Visa card. When you have a global company, there are payment systems in Brazil you need to think of. So you have to get the technical payment people have to be part of that. So you have to really check all the little boxes. And if you can really, if there's some subdomain thing you can migrate first, where maybe some things can go wrong, and maybe for 2 days the company doesn't make any money, but now we're talking a few $1,000s and not millions. but people have felt the pain once. It's not just you being alarmist and saying, oh, this might not work. It's actually okay. Like there is a noticeable impact. It's a bit like a vaccine, I guess. So it goes full circle, the
Full
story.
circle.
But I think like if you can illustrate a bit and really make stakeholders understand, and not just the people that are going to do the work, but also the people that make the decisions, to really flag to absolutely everyone the impact that something might have. And I gave the example with the CEO standing there saying, we're on .com now. And there's 1,000 people that all think we're on .com now because this is just a redirect. You need to work against that narrative and need to like really make people understand it's not just that. So maybe one mistake was that I didn't. So like first, do get the team together. The second, don't lose track of the narrative. Like when you know that this is coming, or when you hear that someone is purchasing a new domain for marketing reasons or for branding reasons, immediately jump onto that and try to influence the communication around that. Because I think like it made the first couple of steps a lot harder to counter that narrative or that understanding that no, it's not just, yeah, you type it in and it works. Like it's that was maybe one of the things that, yeah, I was really caught blindsided by that. And if you can stay ahead of the narrative and don't be afraid to also call it out to like really senior leadership, because it's not the CEO that is a fool and just like doesn't care and just like blast it out there, unless you are in our really niche, and it's like it's very very niche part of this whole digital economy. You just don't know. And it also, like, in the bigger picture, it's not as important in the big picture, what the domain name is. Like it's better to be on .com than on running.com, right? It's like it makes all the sense in the world. And to communicate that, you need to be sure of certain things. And so I'm very sure if I would have gone to our CEO and said like, hey, please, can we communicate this a little bit different for these 5 reasons, or maybe better, these 3 reasons. We have to be careful with this, or like it's going to be a prolonged process. Just please add that to your communication.
And your timeline and your correction for
Yeah.
revenue and all the important details. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of stakeholder management is involved. And actually, I would argue that SEOs have a bigger prominence now, especially with LLMs. Even though it's a niche, I think the role has grown in prominence and importance, and
Yeah.
more SEOs are being brought to the table to help with company branding. And how do you feel about this change for the role and for the industry?
Would argue that we, as let's call us SEOs, we should be a bit careful in the whole development to think like this topic does not automatically sit with us. Like it's a topic that we have to own, and we have to convince people that we own this topic. Because if we think about, for me, YouTube is a search engine. TikTok, ultimately, it's not just a search engine, but it has a really important search engine in it.
It is, yeah.
So anyone who's on a corporate level in charge of, not anyone, but in many, many companies, people that are in charge of TikTok, in charge of YouTube, they all have more like a social media, even like more content creator background. Not a single SEO is head of YouTube videos at a bigger company, at least not that I know. So there's already something that happened once, that something that in a way works a lot like a search out engine, that is not by default a search topic at all. And similar with everything that's AI tools, or Gen AI, however you want to call it, it's not by default something that in a company people say, oh, this is search, right? Or this is, even though we're now learning, and the more you are in the space, you understand like a lot of the dynamics are at least very, very similar to how the search engine works. What you can do to optimize for it, or whatever you want to call it, is very similar. It's not something that by default is your topic, right? So it's something that you still have to earn. You have to convince people that this is something that you need to do, and you need to. And for us, like for me and my team, that's something we're really working on. And again, we have the narrative. We'll try to not control the narrative, but understand who else has a stake in that conversation. Because all of a sudden, CEOs, and if you check your emails, every CEO gets an email. We looked at your AI visibility; it's bad. I'm very, very far away from our C levels, but they get those emails. My boss gets that email. I get that email. Everyone on my team gets the same email. And at some point, someone's going to say, oh, hey, visibility. Oh, let's take that call. And it might not even be your project anymore, or like your expertise only comes way too late when a lot of money is already invested. Fortunately, it didn't happen with us, but I do think that we should not take it for granted that people immediately trust us with that and bring us to the table. I think you have to fight for your seat at the table and convince people that, okay, this is what's going on. So make sure that you show people we have crawler logs. We can show you, we have some data points that already show something. Show people the GA data. These are the sessions we're getting from. It's only 1% of Google, but this is what we can measure. You have some data. Try to get some AI monitoring tool to present certain things already before somebody else was talked into buying a monitoring tool. Because the AI prompt monitoring tools, like if we are honest, they're all very, very, very similar, and you're just scraping the prompt result or the answer to the prompt. But if you're the first one to show that, or we already have a subscription, it's just $100, you can show that, you are earning your seat at the table. And I think that's really important.
And you're helping to influence the decisions, and you're also educating the C-suite in what's happening in this space.
Yeah.
Because yes, they're just seeing the flashy pitch decks or the flashy pitch from a lot of these VC funded tools, and then that trickles down into a lot of scare, like, I wouldn't say insecurity, but like distrust on what's going on in your department, because it's very much an unknown for everyone outside of the industry. For those of us in it, SEO still is important. People with an SEO background are optimizing for AI already, for LLMs, not even AI. The use of the word AI can be argued is too general, right? So we can go on about it, pun not intended. Yeah, but
That's a really good example, because I mean, in going back to how to get into SEO, or how I got into SEO, with the whole how do you optimize for large language models? In order to cut through the noise, you have to at least at some basic level, understand what's going on. I do believe, and there are a lot of good resources out there, and a lot of people in the SEO world are doing really good work for that. I'm thinking like Dan Petrovich, I think Kevin Index, some others. Like there's a lot of people putting out really good content that helps you to understand how does a large language model actually work. Like what is a token? What is compression of the world's knowledge of that's the internet? How does that actually work? And like, again, how you learn Python is from your colleagues. How you learn how LMs work, if you have, like, we have an AI in-house team that is mostly focused on how do we as a whole company use AI tools. They're not necessarily, okay, let's put 50 people on optimizing how ChatGPT sees on, but how do we do AI in general? But really good friend of mine works in that team. Me and him, we got together and we said, okay, how can we better understand this? And we built our own little tool, which was more like a weekend fun project. But from the sneaker blog, I remember how important it is to do something yourself where you decide to go this way. You decide if the font is blue. You decide if it's going to make a lot of money, or if you try to make a lot of money, if you make zero money. So we just bought a domain, whoami.ai, whoami.on.ai, and started to build something where we look at we're not doing the prompt scraping, which there are really, really good tools. And, I don't need to mention all of them. You can find them.
do you have any favorites? Do you have any favorites that you would like to shout out?
I mean, I definitely want to shout out the SEMrush tool, because I mean, I think that's as a whole big suite. Sometimes I'm not sure about the price tag always all the time, but it's a really very good holistic approach on the enterprise level. We're currently using a very small subscription with PKI because the regex functionality works really well, which, for example, Profound did not work for us because we had 100% visibility because it's on as a word and that's everywhere. So there are good tools for that. What we thought about, we want to understand how the base models work. So without any RAG, without any of the context that people might have, just really understand how does a base model understand a brand, a product, because everything after that is a bit blurred by having, retrieved information from the live internet. But maybe at the very core, I believe the LLM base models are going to be like the operating system. And I'm stealing this quote from Enrico Party, like the
Yeah,
really, like I'm stealing his quote there, but
that's
I
a
believe
leader in the
this.
field of it.
Yeah, I mean, like watch all his videos because that helps you to understand how a large language model at the core works, which I think is so important to understand if you want to work in that field. You need to understand how that works. So, and it helped me to work with that because now we're connecting all the base models and we ping questions against the base models. And then maybe Mistral does not know who you are, but Gemini does, or they have some information about you. Having the SEO background, you can look into some of the base models. One base model does not know what a brand is or what they do, and the other does, and the other is Gemini. And you think, yeah, because Google can render JavaScript. You go into that brand's website, if they're a smaller brand and they're not in the news everywhere, you go into that brand's website, very JavaScript heavy. It cannot be rendered. The information cannot be processed. So of course, a base model has no idea what that brand is. And if you're thinking about maybe less ChatGPT and Perplexity with the user interface, but if you're thinking of all the other apps, all the other stuff that's going to be powered by a different LLM, and maybe for maybe a European agency has to use Mistral because it's a European product and we don't want to use a US or a Chinese product, you have to use a European product. Or maybe you're a bit more price sensitive, so you use Llama as a base model, but that model is maybe not as powerful as the latest ChatGPT or a Gemini version, but it powers a tool that is being used by people that make decisions. So you would want your brand or your products to be properly understood also by the base models. And that's a bit the idea that we had. And I'm so happy to work on that in my free time because it forces me to understand the whole ecosystem at a deeper level than just our AI visibility is up 3%. Yeah, because somebody on Reddit hacked something or something.
Or now Reddit is being pulled more, for example, or like, now
Yeah.
it's top source. So it's a vanity metric essentially, is what I'm assuming you're trying to say. And I hear this a lot as well from past guests on how they're really pushing for like experimenting outside of work in order to really understand how these systems work and what workflows you can then integrate to
Yeah.
your team, because the pressure from the top, from C-suite, is just like, oh, we need to be AI first. But what does that mean really, and how does that look like? You'll only know by doing. I'm curious to actually know what sort of workflows, so from your tinkering outside of work, have you created any AI workflows that you've then brought to your team to help you guys out? Maybe any use cases that you'd like to share?
So a couple of use cases that I think like everyone can um, maybe take that as an idea and run with it. I think some of the stuff that what we're doing is I think AI makes information that you have much more processable. And sometimes you might have information that before AI you were not able to use. In my talk at Spotlight, I will constantly repeat it like what only you know makes you special in the world that is AI search. One example would be your Google Search Console data, wherever you work. That's really only accessible to you, agency, if any. But I mean, nobody really knows the exact search terms and the exact stuff that you have. And maybe that's in multiple languages. Like we have a Japanese version of the website. I don't speak Japanese. I don't read Japanese. But with AI, I can pull the data for from Google Search Console. What do people search for that land on this Japanese article? Cluster, translate for me, point out what is missing, and I can have that in an AI workflow. I can feed I can use that this is like one example for multi-language. Another thing that we're doing that we're experimenting with is you can connect, and there's a tutorial on that, how you can use Screen Frog and add some through JavaScript and through like the API, you can use whatever tools. I think it's Gemini, ChatGPT, or the OpenAI API. You can use that API and use the AI model or the LM in the background to on the fly analyze stuff that you're crawling in Screaming Frog. And you can execute that JavaScript in Screaming Frog. And you can, for example, you can audit how good is the content, or you can ask questions and have that process each URL's content. And that makes Screaming Frog a massively more powerful tool than it already was. And so that's I mean, I wish the day would have 48 hours so you could do all the stuff you would try out with that. But those are two things where I think AI is very search related, already helping. Then there's, I don't know, save time in your private life. use agentic browser and like your friend's runs on Strava. Like I don't do that by hand anymore. I just tell my
Really?
comment browser just to like everybody's. Don't tell anyone, please don't. Like,
We will be unfortunately telling everyone now.
yeah,
But
okay.
I love that. Like this actually is a great segue to the rapid fire round. So I have a few questions around AI and SEO. And yeah, short answers. Of course, if it's something interesting enough, we can expand further. But yeah, let me start with my first question. What's the strangest slash interesting thing you've used an LLM for? From what you're saying with Strava, like I think that that's already a great example, outsourcing your friendships.
Yeah, like outside the interactions
Your
with your
support.
friendships, like you still have to have these people like you in the first place, and then you can automate the interactions. No, at least like like I think like actually I talked during our lunch run. I talked with a colleague about that today. That maybe the interaction on social media, not the consumption, but the interaction might to some extent be taken over by agentic AI because nobody has time to like all the stuff that's happening, and maybe that's a slow death of social media engagement scores.
You heard it here first. I actually agree because also with I would even say that yeah, like I would love for agentic AI or like to have an agent actually go in and filter my feed and actually show me feed like stuff that I really really like. So another level, like I don't trust the social media algorithms. I want to set my own parameters and like pull in
Yeah,
what my friends are actually doing so that I can interact with people I actually know as opposed to, trusting Instagram or TikTok and the like.
totally.
So that's a good one. What's your favorite LLM?
Well, that's a good question.
You can have one for work, you can have one for play
Okay, I
if the
have to
categories
say
help.
Gemini for work because we have the Gemini subscription at work. I personally have a ChatGPT subscription, but that's more for the tool. I think for an LLM itself, I think I like Llama because it's cheap, and if you really want to build something, you don't want to pay a premium price for like a lot of the stuff that AI will be doing is quite rudimentary tasks. So why do you have to have the entire world's knowledge and like a super performance system when it's just clicking on something? So yeah, maybe that's
Economical. I like that. You're doing great for Llama's PR. It's an economical choice
that's maybe not the company I want to spawn anyway, but it's all good.
for you personally. What's one SEO task you never want to do manually again?
Write meta descriptions. I mean, it probably doesn't even make sense anymore. It's just, I don't know, spend your time doing something else.
So you've automated that completely or tried to.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, I don't want to throw shade or anything. There might be some cases, really high quality content, very niche boutique type of stuff where you write that meta description yourself. But
You know what? Stick by it. Fair enough. This is your take, Max. So it's all good.
in the AI era, I mean, most overhyped SEO trend that I personally experienced was the voice search element. That really went and it didn't really do anything. Google Home is just as dumb as it was 7 years ago. So it's really sad. In the AI era, most overhyped, boy, that's just, I don't know. You just go on LinkedIn today and just look at what the first post says. That's probably the most overhyped. But in general, in my personal SEO experience, probably was voice search.
Interesting. Next question. One AI feature or product you wish existed.
To delete AI all in general. I just do not have it at all because it might be, I'm not sure. I'm hoping humanity is better off with AI, but there's a chance that not. So if there would be a button where you can just like erase the knowledge that LLMs exist,
Like
maybe
remove
not so good
history
for our job, but maybe for the better
for
of mankind.
humanity.
Yeah, we'll see in 10 years. If everyone's unemployed or not.
Yeah, and if we're not, then maybe yeah, we'll be out in the fields, like just running around and being with nature, which wouldn't be too bad either. A favorite tool you didn't expect to love.
I mean, not to the extent that I love it, which is really Screaming Frog. It's like
So
it's an
can you
OG, but
trust him?
it's like the perfect marriage, and you fall in love over and over again. And there's just like never changing the business model, just doing like something really, really good for everyone. Like everyone benefits of it. It makes the right work so accessible for so many people. I think I'm not sure they probably did more for the livelihood around for people around the world than many governments have done just by putting out a tool that costs you, I don't know, £150 a year. And you can essentially run a whole agency with that or be a freelancer and pay your rent. So
Oh,
like, and keeps getting better. And like, nobody's asking for it to
And
get
you're
better.
keeping up with all the changes and delivering. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think like first the whole when the APIs were available, plugging that in. Now the AI stuff that makes that tool reach completely different level, and still having the funny frog where you can click on the fly and it catches the fly. Like I would say that's a big shout out to
Oh,
Screaming Frog for me.
love that. Love that. They do deserve it. AI agents, overkill or overdue? I would assume you would say overdue because it sounds like you love what the agents can do and you're willing to let them take over your life.
Yes, yeah, I would say overdue. I mean, I think I did like one trial a few months ago when I bought a shoe using an agent. You notice at some point it becomes a bit counterintuitive that there's an AI tool using a human interface designed browser to do stuff the way that we humans do, and you have a drop down to select your shoe size. Doesn't make sense. You should talk to an MCP directly and just the machine could interact with that. But yeah, but I think like in general, the whole idea of having something agentic that does stuff for you, I think like in the agentic browser at the moment, like it's like an intermediary, or it's an in-between step to get to the point where stuff is just using AI as an operating system.
Yeah, and I saw that post that you made on LinkedIn with the example of how you did make a purchase, or like you were saying how this you also had to do it under the radar so that ChatGPT doesn't really catch it. I mean, sorry, the browser doesn't catch that it's ChatGPT trying to do it. Maybe you'd like to expand a bit more about it to our listeners who have not seen the example.
So I think the shopping actually worked fine. There are some other moments when there's like a bot protection. And I think this is something that, you know, the same way that you're not able to prompt certain things anymore that you were able to, I mean, thank God that you were able to prompt 2 years ago. Everything is being a bit more restricted. The stuff people do and try out is always going to be one step ahead of what is being blocked. What was it where I had to skip the protection? Well, I can tell you, you can buy a shoe on on.com without any problems. You can like your friend's stuff, your friend's runs on Strava without any problem. So there's no boundary there. Like I'm curious how many LinkedIn comments are actually written by humans anymore. Like I'm this close to trying to just put funny anecdotes in everybody's Strava activities, but it would show at some point. It's just one of those things where
It's just how the world is turning. Like, yeah, this is how things are changing. And how do you feel about like, and this is a side question, but have you been testing out Atlas? And how do you feel about the security concerns with it being hacked? And agents are great, but the reality of agents are also scary. And also for a big brand like On, there's a lot on the line for potential phishing or malicious attacks. That so, how are you sort of preparing the company for this and to be present on Atlas and to be used by agents in an ethical way?
so I mean, in general, you're not supposed to use anything but the Gemini stack on your work laptop. So that's the official line.
Any other guardrails that you
I mean, yeah, I think I think then again, I'm not a specialist on that side, but from what I understand how it's set up is like it's important that you have the places where the data is stored, that like certain things are in-house, or like it's at least, there's a huge appetite for more information by those tools. And same as with Google search, nobody really knows how the algorithm works fully at Google. I don't think anybody working at OpenAI knows to every single detail what the consequence of having this data somewhere is going to be. Like it's just impossible. Like the possibilities are really bigger than humans can anticipate, probably. So there's a security consequence that we haven't even thought of. So yeah,
Yeah,
like try to keep at
at
least
least
your data with
yourself.
yourself. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I've downloaded Atlas, but I've been using Comet, and then everything moves so fast. You're on vacation for 3 days, and you feel like you've missed out on everything.
And what advice do you then have for people to not get overwhelmed? How do you stay sane with all the changes going on in the industry?
It's a really good question. I'm asking myself if I am staying sane. I do think it's like, I think what really helps is if you occupy yourself with really understanding certain things at the core and at the principle. If you, same way with search engines are designed to connect people with the stuff that they care for. And the whole algorithm is just a hack to imitate a human recommendation. All the things are just little steps to that. if you try to understand, look at the bigger picture of what is this system trying to achieve versus what can I do to quickly hack it today. If you try to understand what is the bigger picture, which sounds really, really plain, but maybe it's, you have to be a proper brand. You have to have good quality because you cannot get away with cheating people anymore in the world of LLMs. Have a good product, have a good brand. It sounds very lame, but like look at the bigger picture, that maybe the one little tip that maybe you read it, yes, or maybe you read it a bit less, is not going to drive you mad because
And
you went on vacation for a week.
yeah, and I want to touch on the point that so for context to our listeners out there, Max was also a speaker last week at Spotlight, an SEM Rush conference, and you spoke about the importance of authenticity and how that's very important for a brand, not just at the branding level anymore, but also for content creation. Like I guess it flows through all the departments, marketing departments, and yeah. So I think that's a very important point to leave listeners with. I have three more questions from the rapid fire round. In 6 months from now, what AI capability would change SEO significantly in your point of view?
I mean, I would say probably MCPs. Like if you move past the using a human focused environment and just speak directly to what the service is or the product is, and then like again, are we gonna have websites in the future? Do I need a website? So I mean, I think 6 months from now, yes, but I do think that
Years from
that's
now, no.
probably. I do think that that is going to be. I'm curious to be, and I'm happy to be completely wrong about this, but I would say that's probably it.
And I'm curious to know, like, how does your day look like? So are you then optimizing for agents for On's website, for On's content? Are you preparing for that future? And how much of your time day to day is spent on these tasks?
It's hard to say like a percentage or something. I think it's like generally you try to. I mean, it's similar principles. You have to have what you have accessible, right? And that's agentic or not, like, or if it's the crawling to build the knowledge, you have to have stuff accessible. That's why you need to try out, can I buy a pair of shoes using a Comet browser or using an agentic assistant? You have to try those things out. And then you have to get everyone to understand that you need to build for accessibility, and you need to continue having everyone who works towards the brand being right to understand, like we need to continue doing this. But when we have something cool, we need to understand that everybody that perceives this activation or this marketing activity, that understands this is on with on.com, and reference that and make sure that that is perceived and understood, and not just understood by somebody looking at it going like, oh, that's cool, but to actually like that information is out there for digital systems, crawlers, bots, whatever, to actually register that and process that, so that you don't throw the branding money out the window. So I would say, like, I mean, don't hang posters to the extent that posters are being hung. At least hang them somewhere where someone takes a picture and you can see the URL. I'm not sure if that's good advice.
Sound. It does sound quite sound. Because especially with a company like On, I feel like, yeah, you're up against, it's great for a physical branding point of view, but in terms of text and understanding of the word and making sure it shows up, that's a whole different ballpark. And you truly are expressing how painful that is and how meticulous you have to be with planning how LLMs pick this up and how you're mentioned. So I think that's very relevant. If AI vanished tomorrow or turned too costly, which part of your workflow breaks first?
First, my workflow, I think so, it's sad to say, but some of the email stuff would probably break first. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, plus, I mean, one really great element is recording and transcribing meetings, because, uh, yeah, that is much more useful than I thought it was going to be. And if you can really go back to, have we talked about this? Have we not talked about this? Yeah, that'd be sad if that's gone.
Yeah, and something
I mean,
that's taken for granted as well.
yeah,
Last question. What's one word to describe the future of SEO?
uniqueness. I mean, I think the uniqueness is going to be like that. You have to differentiate yourself from something else, because everything is like, AI is just one step in the process of everything being much easier to be comparable. Like it's you have to be different, and you have to have like a USP. So I think you have to be unique. And working on for me really taught me that, like the story that they told me when they would put the first On running shoe into the, the wall of shoes in the running store. Those shoes look different because they had the holes in them. And if you go back 7, 10 years, every single running shoe was like this metallic silver, and they all look the same, like Adidas shoe. And I love those shoes, don't get me wrong. The New Balance running shoes, the Saucony running shoes, Nike running shoes, Adidas running shoes, they all are like metallic mesh upper shoes. They all look the same. And then you put one shoe that just has a different midsole, and then people think, oh, let's try that one out. Saying like Hoka, very different looking shoe, successful. So be unique. And especially because, I mean, now you can really compare everything. There's a really good article on The Economist that the scam economy is over, because you can't really get away with scamming people just pretending to be something else or be something that you're not, because that information is going to be surfacing much easier, much quicker. So be unique and be good. But I would say unique is probably super hard to put in one word.
And I love that. No, I think this is actually, again, pun not intended, but the most unique answer I've gotten so far for this question. And I think it's also very, very relevant, and you're very on brand with, I feel like you're almost, your media training is definitely coming through, because you spoke about authenticity. You work for, a brand that is a prime example of how being unique and being authentic to what purpose they serve for is successful. And now you're ending your, term for the future of SEO with unique. Full circle, full circle.
You're too kind. You're too kind. I hope that someone else's company is gonna use an AI summary at least of this call. And
Give this man a raise. Put him in more, you're the proper brand ambassador. Thank you so much, Max. I love this episode. I wanted to give you a chance to shout out any projects you're working on. How can the people find you?
I would say, like, I mean, buy these shoes, buy these products for sure. I don't just work here. I think that's actually a good idea. The second is like, it's very, very, very pre-beta phase, but check out whoami.ai if you want to get involved in like the deeper understanding of what the base models know about you. Contact me on LinkedIn. I know someone very close to me knows very much about how LinkedIn works, and I'm always hearing about how I'm not doing it the right way and I'm not responding enough and not liking my own posts. But do connect with me on LinkedIn if you have a question.
And so that you're probably trying, not liking your own post is probably an authentic way of you trying to grow your LinkedIn profile. So don't think there's a wrong or a right. Maybe there's like a shortcut to fame on LinkedIn, but you're, doing it in a way that works for you. And you do post good stuff. So yeah, guys, definitely follow. Awesome. Thank you so much, Max.